Before we begin, I'd like to save a moment of silence for the United Kingdom and its people. No, this isn't a joke and it isn't satire. I am well aware of the troubles affecting the UK right now, from the riots to the growing hate and discrimination. With Max Fitzgerald, the creator of Turnip 28, being somewhere in all of that chaos, I can only sincerely pray that whatever's going on over there will calm down so that the people can finally get on with their lives. Life is bad enough as it is without us being at each other's throats. Also, I would like to pray for the safety of the common people of the UK, that they be safe in this time of fear and awfulness. I pray as well for those engaged in committing violence, that they come to their senses and realize that by hurting others and causing greater panic, they will only serve to make things worse for themselves and their loved ones. I pray that the ongoing pain and terror in the UK will permanently halt so that we can all sit together at a table as sane and responsible people so that we can play Turnip 28, Warhammer 40,000, Trench Crusade, chess, shogi, shanki, or what have you in peace. Amen. Okay everyone, I've already discussed to you other tabletop wargames like Warhammer 40,000 and Trench Crusade. We've talked about their factions and culture as well as the various theories surrounding them. However now, we're going to discuss another relatively new franchise in the realm of tabletop wargaming. Turnip 28. Taking place in a setting where the entire world is now covered in mud and mutated roots, and technology has stagnated since the defeat of Napoleon, which, in this setting at least, occurred in his campaign in Austerlitz. Now, the populace of the earth wallows in pain, suffering, and terror as people mutate and starvation becomes all too common across the cities and counties of Europe. Even the greatest of military advisors of Europe are not spared from this horror, as von Sneg, the main tutor found in the rulebook, has mutated into a mass of disembodied human toes after leaving a case of verruca untreated, footwort, for lack of a better term, for too long while eating contaminated potatoes. Hi, hello, and welcome again everybody to another episode of Natural Juan. This time around, as I have mentioned, we're going to take a dive into the massive mud pit that was once Europe in the tabletop wargame known as Turnip 28. Special shout out too to Mr. Jonathan Green, my longtime supporter. And also, let's give a round of applause for Derm Haven, one of our many sponsors. As the monsoon season continues to sweep through my country, the Philippines, like a plague from the Old Testament, it brings with it contaminated water and mud not unlike what's found in Turnip 28 itself. It also brings with it many maladies such as warts, similar to what von Sneg had before he became a pile of wormy digits. So before you also mutate into something horrible, better get those skin lesions and other protuberances treated. And what better place to treat them than at Derm Haven, whose record at ridding people of pesky warts are truly record-breaking. It doesn't even matter where you get said warts or where they're located on your body. Let Derm Haven make short work of them so that you'll never have to worry about them again. Right, Doc? Alright, with all that out of the way, let's wade deeper into the mud of Turnip 28. Turnip 28 is a tabletop wargame similar to Warhammer and Trench Crusade, wherein you command troops or soldiers that are represented by figures or models. Each figure or model is, as a rule, although there are exceptions, 28mm in height. This is where the game gets its name, which the 28 in Turnip 28 stands for. However, the game deviates from many other tabletop wargames in terms of setting, concept, and rules. Created by Max Fitzgerald, a game designer and fantasy artist from the United Kingdom, who is also a fan of various other tabletop miniature wargames like Warhammer, Turnip 28 deviates from real life in that it shows the world having changed since the Napoleonic Wars. In the real world and real history, Napoleon won the Battle of Austerlitz, which was considered a decisive victory for his empire at the time. However, in the setting of Turnip 28, Napoleon loses miserably, and thus begins a series of disastrous events that leads to the world being covered in knee to waist-deep mud, thick, horrible mist, global starvation, worldwide plagues, physical and mental corruption that leads to terrible mutations, technological stagnation, and all-around misery. This has continued on for almost 1,000 years, with no sign of ever getting better. While the awful fate of the rest of the world is hinted at in the various rule books, the focus of Turnip 28 is the county of Sist, a minor county in an unspecified part of Europe, although Max Fitzgerald himself hints that the area of the game is very similar to a swampy place in Belgium that is currently the battleground for numerous deranged cults that are under the delusion that they are soldiers of some grand army. The truth of the matter, though, is that the majority of these so-called armies is that they are nothing more than a collection of hunger-maddened peasants with poorly maintained equipment and a hunger that has driven them to cannibalism and very poor hygiene. In terms of rules, Turnip 28 is fairly simple, which is why it is somewhat popular compared to other war games that are more complicated and are more expensive. For one thing, the rule that the figures, models, or minis, which stands for miniatures, should only be 28mm tall is pretty universal. You can use any materials that are available to you so long as they look the part of soldiers from the time of Napoleon Bonaparte. And, even then, the last is mostly just optional considering the setting is pretty much post-apocalyptic, so no need to worry about using plastic, pewter, or tin with your minis, and applying paint, while encouraged, isn't really a requirement. You can use anything from household junk, random small twigs in your backyard or neighborhood, adhesive tape, tin foil, colored clay, putty, and a random theme that will make them distinct from everyone else, and you have yourself an army. Just be sure not to make them bigger than 28mm and give them a running theme like knights, Vikings, or samurai, and that's pretty much it. The rules for combat are also pretty simple, requiring players to use the common 6-sided dice, albeit you'll be using a lot of them. According to the 17th version of the rulebook, 20 of the common dice per player is recommended, although having some extra around could prove useful in some situations. However, the game deviates from other games in that the soldiers you're commanding are, for lack of a better term, either incompetent or insane. That's why the 5 main stats for each mini are movement, attack, wounds, inaccuracy, and vulnerability. Movement represents the number of inches a mini can move across the board or table, which is usually measured out using a tape measure and is often increased using 2 or 1 of the game's dice. Attack represents the strength of a given attack, usually melee, and is determined by rolling a number of dice equal to the attack stat. Wounds are like the hit points or life points in most other tabletop or computer games, wherein losing them all results in a mini being declared dead and, usually, removed from the game proper. Inaccuracy, as the game suggests, represents a soldier's inability to score a hit on a target. This usually means an enemy soldier, although it is extremely rare that a single combatant will even have a 50% chance to hit, let alone anything more than that. Vulnerability represents a soldier's inability to defend themselves from oncoming attacks, and you can bet that most of your minis can very likely die in the first round of battle alone due to mishaps or utter and complete stupidity. There are also panic tokens that can force a soldier to flee in a critical moment and leave their commanders and comrades simply due to an unpleasant smell. Then there are the various blunders that your soldiers might commit due to their own incompetence or the accruing of too many panic tokens, which can lead to incidents such as taking damage or outright dying from simply stepping on a sharp rock, becoming unable to move due to sheer terror, or devouring a fellow soldier or even their own body parts in an act of gruesome cannibalism brought about by extreme hunger and exhaustion. The most important units in an army in just about any game are the snobs, or officers. There are two types of snobs, which are the tough and the toadies. Each player gets only one tough, which is like your general or captain, and can be treated as a kind of avatar or player character, since each player can only get one of them each game. Next would be the toadies, which are like your colonels or lieutenants. And while the general rule is that you only get two of them per regiment or army, players can agree to have more or less than that at a time. While not as important as snobs, but still very important in their own way, are the followers, the common soldiers who march under the banner of each player. They tend to be quite numerous, but the game becomes almost impossible to play should you lose all of them. There are many kinds of followers, from the lowly fodder, which are just lightly armed soldiers that are expected to die in droves in the first round alone, the bastards cavalry unit that are meant to try and overwhelm the enemy with their speed and callousness, to the stump gun, which serves as a very volatile artillery piece that is likely to explode to the detriment of your army after the first 3 shots. As a rule, each tough can command up to 2 formations or units of followers, while a toady can only command 1. The main draw of the game, however, are the many factions or cults of the game, each with its own theme and special rules that make each game challenging, interesting, and utterly hilarious. Some examples of these cults are Strangling Harry's Wretched Recruits, which are more or less normal combatants, relatively speaking. The complex but highly advantageous Aunts Aloft, which includes an armed hot air balloon which serves as a tool for scouting and can control the retreat directions of friends and foe alike, to the ill-fated Todd's Folly, which reverses the conditions for victory and loss, making an already silly game even more nonsensical and hilarious. I will likely create a video, or perhaps even multiple shorts for each of these cults at a later time to provide more insight and not to mention comedy about the setting and lore of Turnip 28. As an additional announcement, I've decided to proceed with Hexed as a game despite the troubled times. The only thing I've chosen to change are some core concepts and the title, which will now be Hired Help. Major alterations include making the heroic factions mercenary companies belonging to various megacorporations or companies, and the time period taking place further in the future. And that's it for this episode of Natural Juan. Stay safe out there.